What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Matt, Dodgers fresh off of an incredible series against the Padres. They were a bullpen blow-up away from a four-game sweep of the Padres, and I love this from Ned Colletti on Twitter. A quick update, as you may recall, on May 5th in San Diego, the Dodgers and Clayton Kershaw lost. The Petco scoreboard operator put up a meme of a crying Kershaw. Since then, the Dodgers have beaten San Diego 8 of 9, and the Padres have lost 10 games in the stand. That's just the cherry on top of what was a great wraparound series this weekend.
Yeah, I thought this would be kind of an interesting test for the Dodgers and some of their newcomers, and honestly, they passed it with flying colors, like you said. They're a bullpen, and really even to place full blame on the bullpen's a little unfair. It was really kind of Yancy Almonte and Caleb Ferguson who had their issues, and in one inning, really one that's all that kind of cost the Dodgers from potentially getting a 4-game sweep. But yeah, anytime you can take 3 of 4 against any team, like I've said, winning series is not the easiest thing to do. So anytime you do that, it's great. And especially when it's a 4-game series, which we don't really see too often. And we definitely don't see wraparound series, which have add an even a different layer to it, if you will, ending on an afternoon, midday type thing. But yeah, great 3 wins for the Dodgers. And I know now we're going to get into a little bit more of encouraging news.
Yeah, the positive news just keeps rolling for the Dodgers. And the headline here is, as we get to some pitcher health updates, let's start with the most important one. And what I would say is the most encouraging one. Clayton Kershaw, Matt, is finally expected back. Dave Roberts clarifying that Thursday at home against the Rockies, Clayton Kershaw will make his return from an injury that, when it happened just before the All-Star break, we thought would maybe involve missing one start. It's now been a lot longer than that, but it's better late than never from Kershaw here.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's definitely been an interesting road to get to this point. When the injury first happened in late June, I think it was, Kershaw was hoping to, avoid the injured list altogether. And had the Dodgers pitching staff been in a little bit stronger shape at that point in time, maybe they would have tried to just push back his next scheduled start, which was supposed to be, I think, against the Pirates, if I'm remembering correctly, and perhaps bought him a few more days. But in retrospect, that wouldn't have necessarily appeared to matter, just because of how much time he's now needed to sort of basically heal and recover still from, it's been described as like left shoulder soreness. Initially, it was inflammation. There was an MRI that, the details and the results of aren't completely clear. All that was relayed to the media was Dr. Neil Elatrash telling Kershaw that, he needs to give his shoulder more time to basically rest and recover. I think if you want to also interpret that as heal. And so that's kind of now here we are after, he's faced batters in 2 simulated games through another bullpen session. And then even then there was still a little bit, Dave Roberts was kind of playing coy until he sort of confirmed what day Kershaw would be returning.
Well, and you've even, as somebody who's been at these press conferences, who's seen him throw bullpens, I mean, there have been some hints from Dave Roberts that even though he is coming back, that it's maybe not all rainbows and unicorns with Kershaw's health, even though they are bringing him back.
Yeah, so after Kershaw's second simulated game at Dodger Stadium, I will note also in both times he faced batters, his fastball velocity was at 90 miles an hour, which isn't alarming. I think, it's to be expected at this point in Kershaw's career, and when you also factor in adrenaline or lack thereof in those type of settings. But, Dave
Are
Roberts...
you saying Austin Barnes, that the dish doesn't get the juices flowing, Matt? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe not for Kershaw, although the time Kershaw did face him a couple days after they lost in the championship round of the ping pong tournament. So I sort of joked to a couple of the beat reporters, was Kershaw going to take it, a little extra harder on his close friend because they fell short to Mookie and Freeman. But no, anyway, Dave Roberts, as you said, his quote was, "I think we're at the stage where it's not perfect, and Clayton certainly could speak more to it, but it's to a place where we can feel he can pitch in a major league game," end quote. And so again, that's discussing the status of Kershaw's left shoulder, which I interpreted that as it's not 100%, and it's maybe not necessarily even close to 95% type thing. And so I guess you just have to be hopeful that it can, hang up for, another 2 more months type thing, 3 months.
And I guess what I'll say is, for the Dodgers, they're not going to put him at risk, especially not in the beginning of August. So to your point, like, he may not be 100%, but clearly they wouldn't be doing this if he had a significant chance of re-injuring or, pushing this back. I mean, the Dodgers are actually extending their lead in the division as we speak. Yes, Michael Grove goes on the injured list, but like they could find ways to get 5 guys who could technically give you innings and fill out a rotation for a few more weeks if they felt like that was what Kershaw needed. So I think the fact that they're bringing him back tells me there's some degree of trust, as much trust as you could possibly have that Kershaw will be okay. So that's good news there. The other few updates here. Let's get Walker Buehler, Treinen, and Feyereisen. We'll start with Walker Buehler. He's ready to face hitters, so he's progressing in his comeback from a major layoff on his end. Maybe the news that fans won't want to hear from Brandon Gomes, and this was in an interview that was done with Bill Plunkett in the OC Register, was that September 1st return that Walker Buehler has been striving for is deemed unlikely. I loved Gomes' quote. He basically said every time Buehler asked him, he's like, let's just focus on today. Like, we don't want him to lose his motivation. So focus on today, then focus on tomorrow. And when we get there, we get there. It's like a little child in the back seat. It's like, we'll be there when we'll be there. All right. We don't need to give you 5-minute updates. But anyways, I think it's positive that he's progressing to a point of being able to face hitters, even if the sort of bold plan that he had for himself of September 1st is unlikely.
Yeah, Walker, he definitely opened a lot of eyes when he said early on when he was discussing his rehab that September 1st was his target. Dave Roberts right off the bat said, that's great that's what he thinks. We have a different timeline basically. I never necessarily viewed it as likely, just because I think basically everything would have had to have gone right for Buehler in his rehab process, which frankly does seem like it has. There haven't been any reports of any setbacks, but I still think then, facing hitters, getting into a rehab assignment and all that, like the timeline was getting really short. And so for me, although September 1st wasn't necessarily likely, if he's back by the middle of September, I think that's still, a great, kind of almost best case scenario for the Dodgers. And they'll be fine. Dave Roberts said they will be fine with him sort of building back up and stretching out with the team during the regular season and not necessarily having to do that while on a rehab assignment. So, if Walker's going to face hitters this week, my guess is he'll probably do it a second time, potentially a third time before rehab assignment. And my guess is that's probably 1 or 2 starts. And then, if he keeps clearing every box without any setbacks, then, we could see him back with the Dodgers within the next 5 weeks, maybe.
Yeah, and the way they used Michael Grove the other day with Ryan Yarbrough as the piggyback, you could easily see Walker Buehler starting with 2 or 3 innings and then Yarbrough piggybacking off. A couple relievers here to update you on. A lot of questions we get on the live show about these 2 guys, so shout out to Bill Plunkett for getting some details. Blake Treinen described as a possibility to pitch before the playoffs. They said he's just slightly behind Buehler. So if you're kind of mapping out Buehler early to mid-September, Treinen maybe mid to late September, although it's worth noting Treinen is a lot older and his rehab has been a lot less smooth. So sort of projecting a linear progression from here on out might be unfair. JP Feyereisen, the guy the Dodgers went and got, knowing that it was maybe wishful thinking he would be a contributor this year, is more of a wait and see situation, which is, the Dodgers way of saying don't expect him back. They said there was a setback. Recently, he's had to slow things down. So they're not going to rush him back. So I wouldn't count on Feyereisen, but I guess good news for a bullpen that we just talked about was the reason for one of the losses this weekend, the only loss this weekend. Blake Treinen and potentially Walker Buehler coming back at some point in September. That could be a huge boost.
Yeah, and as much I know you make a great point about Treinen being older and his rehab process not being nearly as smooth. What he does have working for him is he is only a relief pitcher.
Yeah.
And so he doesn't need to stretch out what his biggest obstacle may be. And frankly, the Dodgers may not even try it this season, would be having him pitch back-to-back games. You would want him to be in position to do that just because of the playoffs. That's when it really becomes a factor. But I think the Dodgers will take, Blake Treinen at 85, 90%, not being able to do back-to-back over not having him at all.
Yeah.
And so, Feyereisen, like you alluded to, he was not somebody I ever really counted on this year. I definitely thought he was more of a 2024 play. Treinen, I thought, would have been back earlier than what it's sort of looking like. Unfortunately, his, like you mentioned, his recovery hasn't been seamless. But, if they can get him back by middle to late September, I think there's a decent amount of time there for him to sort of find his footing. And it'll kind of basically be a repeat of last year where, you add him to the bullpen late and you just kind of hope that you can get positive contributions from him in what they've seen in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, and absolutely. And Daniel Hudson, the other name that kind of is floating
Right.
around here, an interesting LA Times article that he had recently talking about how, he never would have believed that it was his knees that would kind of be the thing that would give him trouble. But there is still seemingly some optimism that Daniel Hudson could return. Where would you put him? Would you put him as more likely or less likely than Treinen to be a contributor?
Ooh, I think he's slightly more likely,
Okay.
just because I think Treinen's issue with the shoulder, it's been multiple things in there that have kind of gone wrong. With Hudson, his knee, even though it can be tricky, I think he's got a little bit more working in his favor. And so, ultimately, I think at the end of the day, the Dodgers will basically get one of the two, like valuable contributions from one of those two come the end of the regular season and into October.
Yeah, here was the quote from the LA Times. Hudson has not resumed throwing and won't until he is able to do some dynamic stuff in the weight room. The Dodgers remain hopeful he will return in September, but they're not counting on it. And then here's a quote. The expectation is certainly that he will return at some point in time this year, but I don't know what sometime this year means right now, Dave Roberts. So I love that. It's like he's going to return sometime this year. I have no idea what sometime this year means, but I just said it, and that was the description I gave you. So take it for what it's worth. So if you want to know what Dave Roberts' injury updates are like, that's probably the most perfect example. He'll return at some point this year. Could be in the next 12 months. It could be in the next 12 days. We have no idea. So again, the headline here: A, the Dodgers demolishing the Padres. B, Clayton Kershaw will start Thursday against the Rockies. Walker Buehler expected back not by September 1st, but maybe early to mid-September. Blake Treinen, probably sometime in September. JP Feyereisen, wait and see. And then Daniel Hudson sort of still in wait and see mode, although there's a little bit more optimism there. So lots of updates for you there. As always, make sure you're checking out DodgerBlue.com. That's where most of this info gets posted right away. And if you're following us on Instagram, social media, DodgerBlue1958, Twitter, any of those places, you'll get those updates as well. You can subscribe, ring the notification bell here on YouTube. That's Matthew Moreno. My name is Jeff Spiegel. As always, thanks for joining us here on Dodger Heads. Enjoy the rest of your day. And of course, go Dodgers.